Testing, testing. JB here. JB here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. April 22nd, 2024. Just going to get on real quick. Talk about the markets, the S&P, talk about earnings, a little bit about some names I'm looking at, and yeah, go from there. Interesting last week or so, the market's selling off. S&P was down. It was almost, I mean, it seems like just yesterday, but we had the market open higher Monday, then reversed to close lower, and that happened three sessions in a row. That hadn't happened in quite some time. And then you sort of some point we'd have a bounce. We had uh, the news Iran with the drones last weekend. Then Thursday overnight we had the news about the retaliatory strikes from Israel, which turned out to just be a small signal, I guess you would say. And I thought that would be the chance for markets to reverse. And Friday, it was if um, the we hit, I think it was 492 and change overnight Thursday night, bounced in the morning before the open, and then it just markets couldn't muster I guess enough strength, and then we just melted for almost the rest of the day. I mean, the Dow has performed well last week. You had Healthcare doing well. I forget who else had decent earning. American Express. So those, when you only have 30 stocks and United Healthcare is up 15%, it kind of skews that index. So uh, the Dow was actually pretty much flat for last week, despite the Nasdaq having the worst weekly performance. I think was down nearly over 5.5%. Its worst performance since October 2022, and the S&P was down nearly 3%. Its worst performance since March of 2023. And we'll have to see. Is this the start of the bigger correction coming, the bear market? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I keep saying that, but the market will decide wrong or right. Good sign here today. Looks like trading in a somewhat tight range. Markets all the way down to 490. Despite went down to 495 and 50 or so at about 11:30, and it started to find some support. So maybe a sign here we can chop around today, tomorrow, maybe get back over 500, get constructive into some of the bigger earnings report we have later in this week. We have Meta, you have Google, we have Tesla, and we have Microsoft. So the Magnificent Seven, four of those are reporting this week, and it's trillions of dollars in market cap. So if those companies can Tesla, we kind of throw away a little bit because I think any surprise from Tesla, maybe it takes off. But right now, it's so much negativity on that name. It's probably the expectations are pretty low. The bar is pretty low on Tesla already. But some of the other names, Microsoft, could certainly help buoy the market a little bit here, and maybe we find some support. And then the geopolitical tensions, which have been keeping the markets a little bit on edge. If those things kind of shake themselves out, I think we'll be in at least somewhat in good shape for a bounce. I keep talking about 487 on the SPY. That would be my line in the sand. I had 504.50. I want to see the markets get back above that. That'd be great. If not, then that 487 needs to hold. Otherwise, we're going to have a bigger move, and then we start talking correction and bear market, and certainly not things I want to talk about. But today, tomorrow will go a long way in determining if this is just the start of just a little relief bounce or the start of a bottoming process, and we can start working our way back up. Take a look. A nice little point. Pinto just pointed, and I posted in the chat room before, and I don't know if it was last week someone pointed, and I put it on FinTwit, but the fact that there used to be talk, right? You used to have this TINA, it was called. There is no other alternative. So that was the big talk when rates are zero. You're pretty much the Fed is pushing people into equities because you're not getting a return on your investment when the rates are at zero, right? And yields are so low that it doesn't make sense to hold a risky or an instrument that has some risk or doesn't. I mean, it doesn't really have that much risk, but you're not getting any return for your investment. Where when you take a look at equities, it's pretty much getting forced into it. So now you look at the dividend yield on the S&P 500, and they're saying, "Wow, here we go, dot-com bubble parallels." You take a look at the yield on the two-year Treasury back in 2000, and the S&P, it paid a lot more to be holding some kind of two-year Treasury as opposed to just holding on to some equities. So are we in the same boat here? You see these spikes back in 2008. Now you have another spike here. Hopefully that starts to turn the other way. But certainly these are things you look at, and it all makes sense when the market's selling off. Said, oh yeah, that's why it's selling off. But then all of a sudden we'll look in a couple months from now, we'll be back at highs, and everybody forgets about these charts and parallels. So that's why it's always good to have, to be open to both sides. Take what the data points point to, and then just be constructive and have a game plan when you're coming in. Like for example, like I've been doing the hedge puts. So always be hedging. I put on Friday. It pays off. Doesn't always pay off, but it helps offset losses on call side if you're in call positions, and also takes out some of the emotion where you're not panicking when we do have a pullback. Take a look at some of the other things I'm looking at. Another decent signal here's the small cap. So on Friday, small caps performed with the Dow, did well despite the Nasdaq selling off over 2%. And then today, a little follow through here. So is it, again, the start of just a bounce like we had here at this right at the start of April, kind of these three candles here, or is it the bounce we've finally been waiting for in the small caps? I'm hoping the latter, but time will tell. And then the VIX, and I keep talking about the VIX, that trend line from back at the end of 2020. The VIX was only up at 32, and it's just been melting ever since. We're finally under that 1745, 1750 handle on that trend line. I think that bodes well. If we stay under 1740, 1750, we're at 1711 here. And that's the other thing. You even look last week, you would think the VIX would have been higher. And even some of these sell-off days, the VIX was red despite the market selling off as well. So again, maybe it's nothing, but certainly some signals here. And that's the right chart there. So that's the VIX. And then last but not least, I've been posting this, the percent of S&P stocks above their 50-day moving average. That keeps ticking higher. It was 30% on, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday of last week. Now it's up near 40% of the stocks over their 50-day moving average. I think great sign here if we can get over 50%. We saw that back in November. That was kind of the trigger point, and then the markets really started to take off again. So I think those will all be good signs. So things I'll be watching. But again, I'm not discounting or ruling out a possibility that this is just a relief bounce. I hope it's not. I hope it's constructive bottom here and we can start heading higher. So now some of the names, MDB. I keep talking about MDB for a put hedge, and I was looking at some of these other names, and some are, I think some of the semi names just really got destroyed last week. So I don't want to. I'm not sure if I'll trade those, and the premiums are expensive. So MDB looks inexpensive on a risk reward basis, and I keep saying at some point it's going to break that 320 handle. And not it's going to be a lookout below scenario, but I mean, it's already $280 off its highs from February. But I do think there's a little opportunity, especially if the market finds some weakness to have a hedge on. And even if it doesn't find weakness, I think this can kind of melt lower. So I think some people are repositioning a little bit out of the cloud names, and maybe they'll look to deploy that capital back into the semis and chip names that have found weakness. But just take a look at this. You look at the gap, its earnings gap back in June from I think it was 280 all the way up to 375 or so. And now we're just melting lower, and we're right at the support it hit in November. So I think that you see me added the puts. It's not that even though it's up $1 right now. It's up 1/3% barely off its bottom. So all the way down to 320 this morning, and then 321.77. It's bounced just a little bit, even though the market has substantially rallied. So I think that offers a decent hedge, so that's why you see me add those puts. And I still have the CrowdStrike puts. I talked about 290. If it breaks over 290 today, that's up 1.8% or so. But unfortunately, what happens, the CrowdStrike puts on Friday were up over 100%. Missed my chance while I'm staring at Avago and Lam Research to lock those in. But I wanted to hold something into this weekend just in case something happened, over the weekend or what have you. But the premiums erode quickly, especially they expire on Friday. So I'll just hold those as a hedge with MDB, and then just continue to hold my call strikes on DELL and some of these other names. So let me talk. Yeah, there's CrowdStrike, 280. So maybe a little consolidation here today. If it breaks over 290, it's getting close. I'll probably just salvage that position. But I like to hold something, especially we don't know, if it's a relief bounce, then want to definitely be holding some stuff. So here's VKTX. So I don't know if I posted a chart in the chat room, but if you take a look at the chart on VKTX, it's so tight. It just finally broke under the 50-day moving average Thursday and Friday. A little bit on Thursday, but more so on Friday. That's kind of why I added the calls. Number one, I added the calls because I wanted to have strikes past April, because it was April expiration on Friday. And two, it just looks like it's setting up. It's tight. It's coiled. Is it third? I think it's Wednesday after the close. They have earnings, and when I talk about these biotech names, you're not looking at that revenues and EPS, because it's Wednesday after the close for VKTX. You're looking for updates. So number one, they're going to talk about their cash position. Number two, they'll give an update on their studies, and I think they have 4 going on right now. They're going to have their NASH data at some point out before the end of the first half. So by the end of June, I'm hoping it comes sooner than that, because my June strike. So hopefully not after June expiration. So they'll talk about that, and then they'll be on a conference call, and they could probably shed some light, maybe some rumors about acquisitions or uh, things they've seen. So there'll be commentary on the conference call too that could certainly move the stock. So uh, last earnings, I wouldn't say they surprised, but there wasn't really much in the way of updates. And I think they had just done an offering, or they did the offering before. I forget, but the stock reverse course, 18s, 20s, 25s, and then it was in the 30s, and then obviously it had its GLP-1 data. So hopefully they give some updates there, and they'll probably give some more color on when their Nash data could be coming out, maybe a little more detail as opposed to saying by the first half of 2024. Um, but I think you just take a look at the chart. And again, I've talked about it. There was an article last week. Now they're talking about GLP-1 oops baby. So people who take GLP-1, it's another big issue or unsolved or unmet need in the US and everywhere is this fertility situation, right? I mean, if you have friends and family and people who are looking to have kids, I know so many people who are trying to have kids that struggle these days, and some have to get fertility treatment, some have to go to specialists, some have to do all these different crazy stuff, right? Things you didn't hear about in the past. And I don't know if that, you know, what that is. Of course, social media and all these other different platforms to spread information is more readily available than in the past. And as you get older, I guess you meet more people who are trying to have babies. When I was younger or a kid, you're not talking to another kid and saying, "Oh, you're trying to," you're not talking about those things. So I don't know if it's more of a function of your age or what have you, but I think it's more prevalent that there's fertility issues, and supposedly GLP-1 people start taking GLP-1 drugs. All of a sudden they had oops babies, meaning they weren't pregnant or having troubles. They take GLP-1 and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm pregnant. So who knows if that's a whole nother unmet need that gets fulfilled by GLP-1 drugs. But you already had, all these other, you had sleep apnea recently with LOI. You already had the reduction of cardiovascular events. You have rumors or reports. I don't know what publication was, Vanity or one of these magazines came out with a piece saying the possibility of addiction might be treated by GLP-1 drugs. So, there's a whole huge market. And it's at some point, you look at VKTX. I mean, right now it's already 60% discount from where it traded after the data back at the end of February into March. If you're a big cap company, it's almost like it's like their data, VKTX's data, could be better than LOI and MVO's. At the phase 2 study, right now it is. So that doesn't guarantee that's going to be a better product than what LOY and MVO have right now, but that's what it's pointing to. So if you want to be a big cap pharma name and say, hey, I can take this asset and compete and grow my market if once it comes out. I mean, I still can't wrap my head around how this is not trading higher than where it is. And then you have the Nash side, which MDGL, which just got downgraded today. I don't know why, but they just came to market with the first NASH drug solution ever. Well, not ever. I think there was one back in the 60s, but then it got removed from the market. But fatty liver is not something that's going away. And GLP-1 supposedly is supposed to be able to be a solution for that as well. But MDGL, which I don't even know what their market cap is right now, when you're getting VKTX, and if their NASH data comes out superior or in line, it's another opportunity for VKTX. MDGL is a $4 billion company, right? Just on NASH, just on their NASH drug, and VKTX is 7 billion, but a lot of that is pretty much, I don't even think there's any NASH priced into the stock at all. So, and not only that, the oral data. So there's so many different levers and buttons to be pushed on VKTX. It shocks me it trades down here. I'm hoping it trades up into the 70s in the next day or two. They did some great commentary and goes from there. So that's VKTX. Let's see some other names here. Sorry. Oh, so some names I'm looking at this week, and I posted about URI, and I've been trying to trade URI, United Rentals, and GWW. I think these are both names that are feeling the tailwinds of that infrastructure bill, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed in 2021. Some of the reasons why STRL, which is one of my top 5 stocks for 2024, has done well is because there's a pent-up demand for infrastructure and all these other projects that need to be done and all this money that's coming into it from that infrastructure bill. And then there's the resources to get this stuff done. And GWW and United Rentals and STRL are all companies that are just taking the supply of all these projects that need to get done, and no demand, excuse me, and they're the supply. They're the people who provide the construction, provide the supplies for, provide the hardware, the vehicles, the raw materials, all that fun stuff. So that's why I looked at URI, its last earnings, and if you look at the chart, I think it was trading, yeah, about 575, and then it was up like 15% the next day, up to 650. This is back at the end of January. Now you look, and it's sold off with the rest of the market. It was up in the 700s when I was trying to trade it for upside. It's down here. It was trading. It hit 621 on this morning. Let's see where it is right now. But both, it's at 630. It's barely, I mean, it doesn't move much. Typically, it's not the most liquid name. It doesn't move around too much. But you have to think it's gonna be another back-to-back strong quarter. Beat and raise, I think it's back over 700 bucks. So they both, GWW, which is trading at, it was all the way up to 1025. It closed at 9, almost 9:30 on Friday, and here it is today, 9:48. So it actually hit 9:56 right at the open. So two names I think could do well Thursday morning. So I don't know if I'm going to trade both. I might just look to do GWW after the open. I've traded that one a couple years ago, and it doesn't trade much during the pre and after hours session for earnings. It trades mostly right after the open. So I might look to get some calls depending on what their earnings are. URI, I might just get calls whether today or tomorrow to play possibly for some premium build and then trade that for earnings for upside. And if you look at GWW, probably back over $1,000, URI over 700 and change. That's kind of the thought process on those. DELL, what else to say here on DELL? Seems every time it looks like it's going to break out all the way up over 118 this morning. And now it's down here at 115. And this is despite the market hitting highs right now. We're almost at 500 on the SPY since I started talking. Just disappointing. I don't know if some of it has to do, and I keep saying SMCI. That one's pretty much flatlined today since it went all the way down to 671. It's up. It's still down 1.5%. I don't know if it's getting just grouped into those names, but I put it on the watch list a couple times. My thought is I'm not going to try and time DELL. If it falls more, I'll just continue to look for hedge positions to offset those losses, and then at some point I look for some June strikes to play for the eventual move. So, I mean, it's a great story. They have billions in backlog. You have to think it's going to head higher in the coming days once it finds its footing here. That's DELL, and I think that's it on my rant. What else do I have here? ACG and CB, ACB and CGC. They're slightly in the green here. Still like those names. It's like 420 was on Saturday. I thought maybe there was going to be a bigger move. At the end of last week, I was talking about the possibility of a banking bill for cannabis. At some point, these are going to start to break out again. Some of these other names going SE LTD, right? So had those $60 strikes, the April strikes. It ramped up. I think it was 54. It went up to 57. I locked some in to cover costs for 100%. Then it started to go again last week. Didn't get over $60, so the rest expired. And then sure enough, what happens today? You had, I think it was two comments, Morgan Stanley and Bank of America on SE. Bank of America, let's see what they did. Is it Bank of America or yeah, Bank of America upgraded the stock to buy, raise their price target from buy to neutral, raise the price target to 70 from 62. I think Morgan Stanley did as well this morning. I'll have to go back and take a look. Of course, what does it do? It soared nearly over. It almost hit $62 this morning, and that's 45 minutes after the open. So, couldn't do that on Friday for some reason. Just kind of comical how that always works. Always seems the day after expiration is when the stock moves up or down based on what expired, what I had. But can't cry over the spilled milk. Not going to talk about Riley. Those April strikes expired. I still can't. They had news this morning. They announced the hiring, right? And if you looked on FinTwit, you would think the company's bankrupt, that they're firing everybody, they're liquidating their assets. Meanwhile, on the flip side, they're paying their preferred dividends. They're hiring people. They're having conferences. Like it's business as usual. So I don't want to sit there and try and time this one, but at some point I might look for more spec calls because I think at some point it's going to squeeze like 30, 40, 50%, especially if they're just waiting on their 10K filing. So the irony on Riley is not the irony, but last year they didn't file their 10K on time. Who knows? I'm not going to try again. I'm not saying this is a squeaky clean company, the CEO and all that squeaky clean. I don't know them, right? I just go by their filings. But it's a 24-year-old public company. It's been publicly traded for 17 years, so they have, what was that, 68 quarters of filings with the SEC were audited by an auditor, right? So uh, to think that they're trying to pull one over someone, I I mean, if it was just a new IPO or recent company, maybe I'm wrong, but that's that. I'm trying to think of some other names here. VKTX. Yeah, I think that's about it for now. Let's have a great day. Hopefully, this is a good week. Have some fun with some of the earnings names. I would love to try and trade some names for earnings. Boston Beer report. There's a lot of names reporting. I think 30% of the companies report. Oh yeah, Kava, right? At some point I'll look to add some more on there. That's one I'm just kind of kicking myself for trying to time it. I thought it was going to break out after it started to ramp up, and then it just sold off with the market. But that's I talk about Kava when I first entered the calls. Great story. 59% top line growth last year. They're slowing down a little on their openings, but I think that one's still going to do well. I just got to see what days their earnings. So they haven't announced their date. It doesn't look like so. Um, let's see. Let's see if I can pop it in. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Yeah, so they're a recent IPO. So they haven't announced, they haven't reported earnings for a full year yet. So it's speculation they might report sometime at the end of May. But if they do, I'll probably look for some kind of spec position to trade into earnings. Not spec, but go a little further out than what I have. But my calls will encompass that, which hopefully will holds the premiums. I mean, I would have to get something to encompass that. So it's not going to hold the premium as well. So I would go out into the to June strikes. I don't even know what those Junes are right now. Uh, unless they surprise and report their earnings date within the May strikes. I didn't even know they had monthlies. 80s look interesting on a risk reward basis. But anyway, that's it, folks. Let's have a great day. Rock and roll.